Hello, welcome back. And I am so excited to be here for a new round of Repaint Reality Manifestation podcast. And this time, I am really wanting us to focus on after the release. After the release, because we just went through an insane season. It felt like eclipse season came in, and everyone had something or another, it felt like, where it was time to release. And boy, did it happen. And this can mean a vast amount of things. And I'm going to go into that. But before we do, I want to say hello again. It's been a second. Um, I feel like so much has changed in the past few months, and it's been wild and amazing. We are in a whole new location. So, Repaint Reality is still coming from Hot Springs, but it's actually coming from downtown. And that is something that I had dreamed of for so long. Um, so long. I remember looking into a journal, an old manifestation journal, and it actually had in it these writings about what a dream day would look like for me. And one of it was being able to like wake up downtown and walk to different places. And the fact that that's been a thing now has been new and crazy. And I'm really glad to say that I do actually take advantage of being able to walk in. And that was something in the beginning that I was like, I'm not gonna say that's what I want and then never do it because, it's like not trusting that I'll follow through on what I want. But it turns out to enjoy it. So it's been really cool. And that is also with drum roll, a really loving partner. And I remember in the last episode, it was actually Love Bug, and I mentioned being like, hey, I've been open to certain things, but I'm not pushing for certain things. And I said I'd let you guys know if that changed, and it did. It absolutely changed. I have a wonderful, amazing partner named Danny. He's magical, uh, very magical. And my goodness, the things that like it, well, oh my gosh. And so, yeah, it's been good. But it's also been crazy. Life also has, it has those highs, it has those lows. It has had this moment where my grandmother, my very magical woo-woo grandmother, she's the one that taught me so many things that have been so useful in life. She has had a stroke in the past few months. And that changed things drastically, right? Because it was what they call a bad stroke. One where she has been the experience now of being paralyzed on her entire right side, which, that's the side that's been her dominant. So that means like non-writing. But then at the same time, it's cut off the part where her brain is communicating to her actual communication center, her mouth, to allow her to articulate words. So it's been a whole new season of learning this relationship with her and getting to experience life with her and all of the family coming together because of the fact that, Granny is in a new experience of life, and we're in this new experience with her. And so it's been this wild ride as life is. And something that I think we can all remember is that we don't necessarily get to control everything outside of us. We're not here for control. Um, Not at all. But we still do get to have so much influence over our response, over how we perceive it, over how we take it all in, and what happens, and how we start to observe the realities of this world and how we allow them to have a meaning for us. Because something that I've always loved was that nothing has meaning necessarily except for the meaning that we give to it. Everything exists, everything is, and everything is inherently neutral. And so what is left is what we start to create a meaning out of. We all have opinions on these meanings. We all have different ways that we receive feelings around these meanings. And a lot of it has to do with our values based on what it starts to mean to us, Even with things like family, having these hard moments. It's like when our family has health problems, and it's easy to feel as if it means something. Um, but it really does get to be the meaning that we put to it. I mean, it could mean that, we could be in that space of it being a doom. Does it mean that it's not enough time? Does it mean that we don't get to have things the way they were before? And even though maybe time is shifting and maybe things aren't the way they were before, also mean that the family is now going to appreciate time on a new level? Does it mean that it reminds us of how much we are meant to appreciate that time? Does it mean that we're going to learn how to give back in new ways that she gave to us her whole life? And this is one example on one scenario that I can't control. But I think this is part of what I'm realizing with the season of release. Something that hit me really hard was that I had this release of expectation. This really taught me to release what I was expecting out of her, out of the medical world, out of maybe even spirituality and manifestation. Um, because we are all on these different soul paths for each individuals. And even though we are so intertwined with each other, we are so connected, and it's easy to take others' journeys and their stories and make them mean something about us, it's still not our story. It's still not us. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm ever going to be responsible for what someone else is going through in that sense, especially with health, especially with how they perceive things. And my goodness, my granny's doing a great job, I feel like, energetically. I mean, it looks exhausting. She looks exhausted. Every day is a lot. But to be showing up with the will that she's showing up, I mean, it feels like it's her pure will right now. But that's another thing is I've had to release expectation of what she's going to decide that she wants and to be supportive of her through what her soul and spirit wants. Um, and not to expect her to want necessarily the same that I would want for her in my own desires and my own, because it's so important to lean into what is for the highest and best good. It's easy to think what we want. All of us sometimes have a first go to of what we want. But that highest and best good clause comes in where we're always allowing for the highest and best good of all, because it is never going to be for me to decide what is going to be the best for everyone else. And it's never going to be for me to control what other souls and their journey and their experience is going to be. I can always offer my energy the best I can. I can always offer to be service. I can always offer to be support. And my goodness, I will. I will in the ways that I can. But that doesn't mean it's for me to hold on to all of the weight. And that was something that became a release, is this expectation. And I think a lot of us sometimes hold on to expectation of others, expectation of what we think was supposed to happen, expectation of what we believe we were owed, expectation of what we believe we were going to be able to do, expectation of anything. Can be a really big release. And a lot of times, I think when we do finally have release of any kind, whenever anything was let go, anytime we have loss, anytime we grieve and experience grief, I think there's an expectation on some level, a belief that we thought we were going to receive that has not been met, that did not meet the bar, where we imagined a joy to come from an expectation. We believed something would happen, come into fruition, be there, be available, someone would be there, something would happen. And suddenly, when it's not met, we enter this season, this period of either holding on to it, holding on to the idea that this expectation should have been met. And that's where we can suddenly hold on to the feeling of why didn't it? Why isn't it? Why can't I just change it? Or we can start to release the expectation. And what comes with that suddenly is the acceptance. And I'm not saying that it makes things right. I'm not saying that there's not going to be a level of asking, what can I still do? But what I'm saying is that with this acceptance, what can I do suddenly comes from the place of what I'm actually capable of with where I'm at in the situation. Instead of having to fight reality and act as if it's not serving me, as if it meant something really disastrous, even if it can be an unfortunate sequence of events or something that was not within my expectation that I preferred, knowing that it is a fact can allow me to start from that place and build from there. But with denial, without releasing that expectation, by still having that expectation and holding on to it for dear life when reality is not lining up to that, but not meeting it there and being in denial, suddenly I don't get to build from reality. I don't get to build from what exists. I just stay in the fluster. And this is where the attempts can suddenly not, you can feel like you're putting in energy and energy and energy, and you're thinking about the opposite and you're trying to get it, but suddenly when we don't have that release of expectation of others, of their health, of them, what they owe us, what they're going to do, suddenly if we don't have acceptance for the facts, for what we're shown, we don't get to start from where reality is. And so with that acceptance, we get to build from this place. Now, what I mean by this doesn't make anything, because sometimes it's not something that's out of someone's hands. Sometimes it's things that are in people's hands. Uh, by having acceptance and releasing expectation, what I can mean by this is also that if someone, if you have an expectation of someone and they're not following through, accepting that and releasing that expectation doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're releasing it and just letting it all slide, but it can mean that you're releasing that energy, and what it is that you believe that you're needing or what you're needing to receive doesn't need to come from them. And you can then take the action, which can be the boundary, it could be the release, it can be making room then for new energy to come in. And this is an example of someone's doing something. If someone has been mean to you. If you're in a relationship and someone's not, in their part of it over and over, and there's been communication about that, and there's been attempts, and it's just, or even if you just don't feel it, and it's time to release the expectation of yourself to show up for something that you're not wanting to show up in. Releasing of expectation can go so far. Releasing expectation of self really does go so far, especially when we started having blame and judgment and all of this chaos, chaotic beliefs about ourselves because of these expectations we had on ourselves that we weren't necessarily meeting because it probably wasn't in alignment for us. So at the end of the day, we're all here experiencing together. We're these souls. I read something yesterday that really, 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 really resonated with me. And it's that we've believed for so long that we are the mind and the body. We believe we're this body, so we hold on to it so much. And we believe that we're the mind because that those are the thoughts that race. And it is the thought that precedes us in the I statement so much. And so, because of that, whenever we have narratives from the thought, from the mind, I can't live up to this. I don't need this. What am I doing? That is not actually us. It is the mind and beliefs telling us stories. But the actual us, observing the thought, hearing it, is our awareness. We are observers. We are these souls in a body, experiencing a body. We are aware of the body through the mind. We are aware of the mind. We are aware of thoughts. We are observing, conscious of thoughts and the stories they tell us. But we're not the thoughts. We are the observer of them. And suddenly, it makes it easier, for me at least, to detach a little bit more from the expectation, many expectations. I go back to that place suddenly of being the observer again, the observer of thoughts, the observer of what's happening, the observer of everyone's different choices, the observer of what I get to do in response, what my body and what my mind can then respond to. And I feel that there's a lot of peace that comes back to remembering that we have so much that we get to influence, yes, but so much that we are here to experience by just being, and our soul being here to experience is enough of doing our purpose. We're not falling short. And I think that's a big expectation to release. We're not falling short on anything. We are experiencing very short moments in a huge, huge timeline. There's so much time before us. There's so many ruins that we can see from people and from the world before the people. There's so much time after. We don't even know if it's going to stay. Time continues, but does matter stay the same? Is the earth going to stay the same? 1,000, 2,000 years. How different does it make? And so we have so much responsibility and experience while we're here. And what that comes back to is really coming back to being us, knowing our truth, knowing our integrity, discovering ourselves, coming back to the honesty of that as much as we can, and experiencing and observing and connecting. And we get to make that what we do. And we get to make that something beautiful through our observation and how we respond to what we observe and how we perceive those experiences. And all of it can have a filter, all of it can have a lens. All of it can either feel as if it is for you or happening to you. And it's a really weird statement sometimes when that comes up, especially when things that are unfair come up. But a lot of times, the reason it doesn't feel fair is because of the expectation that we put on it, that we believed was fair. But we are more than expectations. And everyone around us is more than the expectations than we put on them. And we are observers, we are awareness, aware through thoughts and the mind and the body and each other, and connection. And through this season of release, after the release, I hope the things that you remember that you get to have is this connection with awareness and yourself, connection with being this observer. You will always get to be this observer experiencing new. And every time we release that expectation again, we come back to ground zero of acceptance with asking, where exactly are we? If we release that expectation again, we get to rebuild from what is the nothingness except for our pure authenticity, except for our current desire, except for our current landscape, except for our current reality, except for the current tools in the toolbox that we're handed with exactly where we're at, where our integrity is, with where our desires pulling us, with what are inspired towards. And the more we release expectation that is not serving, the more that we are left with what our authenticity is and how to move forward from that. It's the new freedom that we get where we get to be curious and aware and observing ourselves again. So after the season of release, I encourage you to lean into awareness and just being the observer when the thoughts get wild and when the mind says too much, especially about you. No. Sit back again and sit back into asking, am I aware? Am I conscious? Am I this consciousness? Because this consciousness, this ability to observe the thought, observe what the mind is saying. This is the soul. This is you. This is the being powering the thought. And allow the thought to be the thought. Does it serve you? Where's it coming from? It can come in and it can go. But you are vastly more. And you are inherently, divinely, beautifully fucking worthy for showing up as this divine soul. And I do always try to clarify being worthy as a soul is you are inherently worthy and you are more than enough because you are existing and you are being awareness and observing and experiencing. Experiencing is what we get to do and in creation throughout that. However, we still have accountability. So you are a worthy, unlimited, just more than enough being, but you also get to be accountable because we chose to be these spiritual souls in a 3D human experience. And that is why the blend exists between this 3D and the spiritual and the way we blend them. So much of this is that we are these souls and we are awareness and we are consciousness that chose to have this human experience and to observe through human experience. So we are observers of humanity. We are observers of being this, and I hope that you make it the best experience that you can experience in this human body. I really do. There's a lot happening. And there's so much being observed, so much being received, so much being realized, but there's also so much that we can release. And so I am wishing you the best, so much love, so much magic. And I hope that you have a wonderful day. I hope you sit with your heart. I hope you sit with awareness. I hope you sit with release. And may it all be for the highest and best good. And if you want more, continue exploring on the Repaint Reality podcast. It's a cool place. You can find me on Instagram at Hello Karina Joe. And I do have a new book out. So crazy to say. Uh, and it is called Heart Confessions. It is a poetry collection. Has a lot of shadow work, you could say. Um, really cool stuff. It was a book that was created over quite amount of time, quite a season, and it was in April was the last poem that I actually wrote that was put into there. And then it wasn't until months later, until now that it's finally getting out into the world. But sometimes you need that season of creating and then letting it kind of rest before you can revisit it and make it outside of yourself. I think I needed to have peace with everything that was written in it and allow it to be packaged and in the past before I could allow it to come out to the rest of the world. It needed to be in its closure for me first. And that's my choice. And so I hope that you guys enjoy it. If you choose to read it, I have signed copies that will be available soon. Because I'm gonna get lots of them, sign them all. And I hope that you guys have a magical day. Thank you so much. And see you in the next episode.